Jump in here. So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brent Scott. Hello in the back. I'm Director of Influencer Strategy at CJ. So if anyone caught my panel session yesterday by any chance, we had a really great discussion around social commerce. And in this session today, we're going to be discussing sort of what I kind of consider to be a close cousin of social commerce, which is social search. We're going to look at that through the lens of the FinServ category specifically, kind of to use as our category example. I started my career way back in 2011 in search engine optimization. So I spent about half a decade, chasing Google's algorithm and trying to figure out how to rank my clients' websites higher than their competitors for relevant queries, doing so for VC-backed startups, Fortune 500 companies. And I did that for a few years before eventually making the shift into influencer marketing. And I've been doing that for the last decade or so, the last 3 years here at CJ. So the convergence of influencer and social content with search is a phenomenon that I am really fascinated by and really excited to explore in this session today. So I want to start with a little bit of history here. We all know that the landscape of social platforms has evolved tremendously over the last few years. You have platforms that have kind of risen to dominance and then faded into non-existence. And new ones are always kind of ready to replace those ones. But what I find really compelling when I look at this timeline, and what I want to focus on to sort of set up our topic today, is the what and the why behind some of these platforms and the shifting trends that we can observe in terms of how these platforms are used by their members. So what I'm really getting at is what you see on the bottom row here. This evolution of the purpose behind social media over time. So starting in the early days when social media was all about networking. And in fact, many of you may recall that in those days we actually used the term social networking, which has become a little bit antiquated these days in favor of social media. But if you trace the evolution of these platforms, you can see this path from networking to expression to entertainment, and finally to where we find ourselves today, which is social media as a primary source of information. So largely driven by this evolution in the ways in which audiences use social media, the ways that we discover new information online have changed in kind. So between 2015 and 2024, Google enjoyed a solid decade of search dominance online. They captured over 90% of global search traffic for 10 straight years. However, you can kind of see recently the winds have begun to shift, and you're starting to see some cracks in Google's information domination. So in 2024, for the first time in a decade, Google's search market share dropped below 90%. And some analysts have predicted that trajectory could increase to seeing traditional search engine traffic decline by as much as 25% by the end of next year. So don't get me wrong, Google is still the gold standard when it comes to search engines, but you really can't ignore that trend line. So I think it begs the question of, what's really going on, what's happening here? And I think there are a few dynamics at play. You certainly can't ignore AI assistants have captured a significant chunk of that search landscape. But there are also a lot of generational preferences that has contributed to this decline. When you zoom in specifically on young audiences, and I'm speaking about Gen Z and millennials in particular, you find that they're starting to prefer the content and format of information that they find on social media over the results that they get from traditional search engines like Google. So part of that preferential shift is influenced by a perceived decline in the quality of search results and the user experience that they're getting from Google. So 42% of people actually say that Google search is becoming less useful for them. So I think this begs the question, how should brands account for this? What should brands be doing given sort of these trends? And the answer is you got to be making memes. I'm kidding. But no, there are some actual strategies that we're going to explore here that can help brands start to capture some of this shifting trend in terms of where their customers are finding information online. So before we dive into that, let's first kind of capture the opportunity. What does this look like in the social search landscape, and how should brands be thinking about this? So to give an example, again, we're going to use FinServ as our categorical example here for the remainder of this presentation. Finance-related online searches have skyrocketed in 2025. Can anybody maybe take a guess or propose a theory why that might be? Obviously, economic uncertainty can complicate a lot of things, and it certainly has increased my personal stress levels. But it also presents a great opportunity, particularly for finance brands and publishers, right? Because the interest in finance topics online has never been higher than it is right now. So consumers are looking to educate themselves, they're looking to prepare themselves for what may be coming, and there's a strong interest in financial literacy amongst broad segments of the population. Case in point, this is a graph showing search interest in the keyword tariffs for the early part of this year. And if you can't see, or if you're not sure how to read this graph, the y-axis of this graph is actually an indicator of the search popularity for that keyword throughout history. So from the first time anybody ever searched tariffs to when this graph was pulled. So 0 being the lowest point of popularity, 100 being the highest point of popularity for this keyword. And as you can see, in April of this year, it spiked at 100, right? So a lot of people looking to learn about this topic, explore information about tariffs, and we all know why that is. So let's take a look at what users are finding out about tariffs on social media. And this is a result from TikTok. And it's a result for the query, how do tariffs work? TikTok is actually one of the more popular social platforms for searching. TikTok and YouTube are kind of dominating social search right now. And looking at some of these results, you can start to kind of understand why many searchers like to prefer this type of result to a traditional search result. TikTok's algorithm is returning a really strong result for this query. There are videos explaining what tariffs are, how tariffs work, what the motivation behind President Trump's tariffs could be, how tariffs affect the end consumer. So it's a really rich and informative, and it's an intuitive search result, right? I think if you put yourself in the mindset of a searcher looking for information on this query, this is all the different variations of what that person might be looking for. And specifically putting myself in the shoes of maybe a Gen Z searcher, I can scroll through these videos, I can watch and passively listen to the information, and I'm entertained in the process, right? So a lot of those younger searchers prefer this content, this format, to what they might find in a traditional search engine. So let's take a look at a keyword landscape that's maybe a little bit more commercial in nature. And then we can compare the search results from Google with the search results from TikTok and see what we like better. So this is a summary of the keyword landscape for the search term credit card. There are over 200,000 searches a month for this exact keyword. But when you expand this query to include common variations, that number balloons to over 51 million searches a month. So it's obviously a very lucrative category, and it's a very competitive category. So let's take a look at what Google gives us for the search term credit card. And I realize you probably can't see the results here, but we've annotated them. And I want to call out kind of just where these results fit categorically. And so you have about a third of the page that's dominated by advertisements. Not a great user experience. You have follow that up with a list of branded card results. And again, putting ourselves in the mindset of a searcher looking for what are the best credit cards. They're looking more than likely for objective information that they can trust to make an informed decision. So brand results, probably not what we're looking for. Then you have about a quarter of the page reserved for suggested searches, so Google's sending you off in a different direction that you didn't ask for. And then lastly, all the way at the end is the editorial results. I would argue, in my personal opinion, that the best result on this page is the social content result. It's actually a Reddit thread full of people having a dialogue, discussing pros and cons of different cards, and sharing their authentic personal experiences based on the cards that they have and use every day. So let's compare that again to TikTok. And to my eyes, again, this is a very rich, informative, diverse, educational list of results. So there's nine videos here above the fold in this search result list. And what do we see here? We see card-specific recommendations from trusted third-party experts. These are videos that go in depth into the benefits of these specific cards and outline why these creators prefer them in their wallet. We also see card recommendations for relevant use cases or personas that appeal to my specific needs and interests. These are results that speak to the best cards for students, the best cards for young professionals looking to build their credit, for travelers who might be looking to make the most out of their next trip. And as a searcher, I have the opportunity to consume ranked lists. So I can watch these videos and learn about pros and cons of various cards so that, again, I can compare and make an informed decision about which cards I might want to use. And finally, I'm seeing extremely timely results and recommendations with new offers and opportunities specifically for 2025. So this is what's great about social content. It's always fresh, right? Content expires much faster on social media, and it's always replaced by a fresh result. So at the risk of sounding repetitive, while I'm learning and consuming this information that I search for, I'm also being entertained by these creators. So it's just a more enjoyable, more digestible searching experience. And so for my money, personally, I'm taking these results every time. Where do influencers play a role in this? Let's talk about influencers, and specifically in the context of this discussion, finfluencers. There is a tremendous amount of momentum when it comes to brands and influencers working together to create content. The creator economy is valued at about $250 billion today, and that's projected to double in the next 2 years. And specifically in the finance category, the degree of influence wielded by content creators in comparison to finance brands and institutions is pretty stark. So if you take the top 10 finfluencers, they reach 6 times more followers than the top 10 financial institutions. So just based upon that information and what social media users are telling us about what they prefer based on who they follow, the desire to get this type of information from creators far exceeds the desire to get this information from brands and institutions. And the reason influencers are so popular is because they command a level of trust from their followers and their communities. It's human nature to trust people over institutions. Consumer trust, I'm sure we're all aware right now, has never, consumer trust in brands that is, has never been lower. Consumer trust in traditional media has never been lower. But what audiences trust in 2025 is people, and particularly experts. So the endorsements of trusted third-party experts on social media are very, very powerful to searchers who are looking for this information. So how do we do it? How do we take advantage of the opportunity provided by social search and these shifting winds in terms of how consumers are finding information online? So we're going to talk about some strategies here for succeeding in social search. And I don't mean just succeeding in ranking content, but also providing a true business impact to your brands and publications as a result of these types of strategies. So a lot of this is pretty simple, right? We're going to get into the weeds a little bit, but first and foremost, you have to have good content. A couple ways to make sure you're doing that are to leverage social listening. And partnering with influencers. So engaging in social listening to identify trends can help ensure that the content you're producing is answering the questions and the needs that audiences have. And of course, as we've discussed, partnering with influencers to create that content in collaboration with your brand it will ensure that the content is viewed as trustworthy and authentic. So brands can really siphon some of that trust, some of that authenticity off of their influencer partners and absorb that into their own brands. And then, of course, what we're talking about here is social SEO, right? So you want to make sure that people can find your content. So optimizing your content with social SEO strategies will help ensure social algorithms will return your content for appropriate search queries. And as a side note, they'll also make the content more visible in organic search feeds as well. Another useful tactic is paid amplification. We're not going to get into that too much. But the crux of that is as you start to see content rank well and perform well organically, there's always the option to double down on that with a paid amplification strategy to boost that content out to broader but still highly relevant audiences. And lastly, you want to make sure that once audiences find your content, it's actionable, right? So you want to provide strong, clear calls to action, enticing offers, sign-up incentives, whatever it is that's going to motivate your potential consumers to convert once they find you, including that messaging within the content is key. There are some really effective tools that can help you design an impactful content strategy for social search. TikTok in particular has made a lot of investments into its own proprietary search tools. You can visit the TikTok Keyword Insights tool to identify trending search queries and discover creators who are authoritative and vocal on these topics. You can, in fact, you can see in this screenshot the growing popularity of credit-related searches on TikTok. So in a very short amount of time, the search popularity of credit queries has increased by over 100%. So it just shows you, in the data that social media users are using TikTok in particular to find this type of information. So there's a tremendous opportunity to be first to market when you're paying attention to these trends and beat your competitors with content that's going to satisfy these search queries so that as users are searching for information, they're finding the messaging and the narrative that you want them to find. So I mentioned optimizing social content for search. How is that done? The tricky part about social search is that each platform has its own algorithm. So what works on one platform may not work in the same way on another platform. So we are going to focus in on the two most dominant social search platforms, which are TikTok and YouTube. On TikTok, you want to make sure that you are using keywords appropriately in some key places within the content. So you want to make sure you are, and when I say you, this could be you and your content, or of course it could be your creator partners, right? So this comes back to how you brief them, how you activate them to deliver this messaging. But keywords, obviously, for social search are really key, and where you include those keywords is very important. So you want to make sure you're including keywords in captions, in on-screen text, within the spoken audio of the content. TikTok can detect keywords in all of those sources. You also want to use keywords opportunistically within comments and replies on the content. Comments can be a really key ranking signal for TikTok, right? As viewers engage with the content, TikTok takes that as a signal that the content is high quality. As they ask questions, you or your creator partner should be answering and engaging with them in those comment sections. All of that is going to boost the relevancy and the authority of that piece of content so that it ranks higher. Next, you want to identify some appropriate hashtags. You don't want to overdo it. A lot of times you see creators or brands that are stuffing their descriptions with hashtags. That can actually have a reduced effect, right? If you include too many hashtags, you're diluting sort of that environment, and they won't carry as much weight. So 3 to 5 is typically where you want to be for hashtag usage. You want to choose those, appropriately based on the topic that you're trying to rank for. And finally, lean into trends. If you can align your post with a trending audio or a trending search query or a challenge, TikTok is likely to favor that as it drives, that additional audience engagement that can boost its rankings. Looking over at YouTube, again, a lot of keyword involvement here, but it's going to happen in some different places. So titles and descriptions are very important on YouTube. But there's some others, maybe lesser known areas where you can optimize for keywords, things like chapters. So particularly in longer YouTube videos, you can include chapters so viewers can kind of skip to the parts that are most relevant to them. Using keywords in those chapter titles are also a ranking signal. Likewise in playlists and video transcripts. So when a creator publishes a YouTube video, they can include it in a playlist that they have on their page, and that opens up a whole new sort of source of data that YouTube can use to evaluate the relevancy of that content based on how it's grouped with other videos. And then transcripts, like I said. Every YouTube video that you or a creator uploads, you should be uploading a transcript as well. That's going to help YouTube understand the message of that video, and it's going to help it understand where that video should rank for certain queries. You also want to focus on engagement signals on YouTube. So again, comments are really key. Video view length is really key. So a lot of times you'll hear brands talk about how long should the video be. And depending on what sources you look at, some sources will say it should be 3 minutes, some say it should be 10 minutes. The truth is, it should be as long as it needs to be to answer the question or to provide the information that you're looking for. The key is that you want to keep viewers engaged through the duration of the video, right? Kind of early off-ramps, those types of trends can cause YouTube to sort of devalue that content because they think it's not answering the information that users are looking for. So let's take a look at a couple examples. This is the top ranking TikTok result for the query best credit cards. So I'm gonna do a little Q&A here. Anybody in the audience want to point out something that jumps out at them off of this screen in terms of a ranking signal and why this content might rank first for this query? I don't know if you can see that. Hopefully you can. Absolutely. So it's, again, look for keywords, right? So we're looking for best credit cards. Is this going to work? Not really. You see all over this content, multiple instances of text on screen saying best credit cards, right? You have the description, very robust description talking about best credit cards, providing that context that the search algorithm can crawl and understand. This is probably very small. Maybe you can see it better up here. The engagement signal's very strong, right? So you've got thousands of likes, hundreds of comments. You have the creator here answering questions, engaging with his audience. That's going to be a boost. That's going to be a boosting signal as it relates to search. And then finally up here, the hashtags, right? 5 hashtags. They're chosen very strategically. Didn't overdo it. Didn't water them down, right? And so that's how you end up ranking #1 for a very competitive keyword in terms of best credit cards on TikTok. Shift over to YouTube, do the same thing here. Anything jump out at you guys in this YouTube search result, keeping in mind the context of what we know about YouTube and how they rank content? What was that? Sure, subscribers, yeah, absolutely. You know, that speaks to the creator's authority, right? The more followers a creator has, generally they're going to rank higher because YouTube is going to determine that that creator is authoritative, that they're a subject matter expert. Yeah, that's absolutely a ranking signal. Again, title, 3 best credit cards you should be using in 2025. You have a transcript here. You can see that. The YouTube creator has uploaded a transcript with his video so that YouTube can very clearly crawl that and understand what the video is about. You have his description here. Lots of helpful information about what's included in the video. YouTube can crawl that as well. And then lastly, this video is included in a playlist. So that's a signal to Google that where this video lives on this creator's page provides context and some additional data based on kind of how this video is organized amongst other videos that they can also draw insights from. So this isn't a video, this is in a playlist called Watch These to Get Rich, right? So it's included with other videos about financial literacy, about, obviously best credit cards, investing tips, things of that nature. So that provides that additional context to YouTube. So how do you start to do this with influencers, right? There's a few different degrees to which you can activate creators to help do this kind of work for your brand or your publication. Some brands and even publishers have leaned in really heavily on creators to the point where they're partnering with established creators to serve as actual kind of brand representatives, right? Combining the creator's personal brand with the brand of the institution itself. To some, that's a step too far, so you don't have to go all the way down that road. But you can certainly hire creators as sort of UGC freelance content creators, right? So they can create these content assets for you. You can publish these videos on your own social platforms as the brand. You can co-publish them with these creators, and of course use all of those sort of ranking optimizations that we just explored. And then lastly, of course, you just have influencers as paid partners, right? So this is probably the most common thing that you see, where you have a brand partnering with an influencer. Influencer creates a piece of content that delivers the brand's desired message to the creator's own organic audience, right? So very scalable way to do that. So any combination of these things is kind of on the table when it comes to ranking in social search. And the key is once you have these content assets created, optimizing them using those techniques that we just discussed. I briefly mentioned AI at the top of the session here. How does AI search factor into all this? This is very much secondary. You know, I think our primary focus, especially as it relates to influencer marketing, is social search. But social search does have some connective tissue with AI search. So tools like ChatGPT and Gemini can access indexed social content to answer certain types of queries. And often will include insights from authoritative social creators. So as you're optimizing content for social search, you're also seeding content for AI tools to capture as well in the answers that they provide in their platforms. Next time you use an AI assistant to maybe research a topic, pay attention to the sources that it's providing with its answers. And you'll probably find that within that list of sources is YouTube content, TikTok content, Instagram content. As these AI tools access the web with their web search tools, they are pulling in any social content that is indexed within those web search tools. One last thing to keep in mind, separate but related, especially in this FinServ category, if you're going to activate a creator program, whether or not it includes a social search strategy component, something that you want to be mindful of is compliance. So unfortunately, at the exact same time, my colleague Chrissy was giving a session over there about compliance, but we're both happy to talk to you about this if you're interested. But the gist of this is that brands do bear some responsibility to the accuracy of the information that their social partners, their creator partners, are delivering to their audiences. So you want to make sure that you are monitoring that content for accuracy, bearing in mind that accuracy is fluid, right? As content or as the messaging within a piece of content expires, meaning like a promotional offer goes away or pricing changes or whatever it may be, you want to have that content updated or replaced with fresher content from your partners. CJI, our influencer solution, that's part of the services that we provide, is that ongoing content compliance monitoring. So in closing, we've got 2 minutes left. If you leave this session retaining only a few things, this is what I would optimize as the takeaways, the ideal takeaways. Consumer search behavior is fundamentally changing. Users are moving away from traditional search. In addition to AI tools, they're primarily discovering new information online on social platforms like TikTok and YouTube. And on these platforms, the content that performs best with those audiences who have affinities, especially towards financial topics, is content created by trusted, authoritative third-party experts like FinFluencers. So the brands that prioritize building relationships with these experts and leveraging their content alongside some simple social SEO tactics stand to gain a tremendous amount of value in the shifting search landscape. We've got 1 minute left. If anyone has any questions, happy to answer. Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you.
I saw you have mentioned like FTC guideline.
Yes.
We are also facing kind of, not challenge, but some brand would ask us that could you make sure that every influencer are going to follow the FTC guideline?
Yes.
So I just want to ask your opinion of this.
The question is about FTC guidelines. So when a creator is partnering with a brand, if they've received any kind of sponsorship from that brand, doesn't have to be cash, could be a free product, could be an exclusive discount even. The FTC requires disclosures to be very clearly stated in that content. If creators aren't doing that, they stand to get in legal trouble, and their brand partner also stands to get in legal trouble. So very important to make sure that all of your partners have those disclosures included in their content. And there's guidelines around what those disclosures need to look like. And really what it comes down to is it needs to be very clearly stated and understandable. So like hashtag advertisement, for instance, is one that you see a lot. How you ensure that your creator partners do that was the question. And there's really no, I mean, it's maintaining that relationship, right? So as you are activating, yeah, there's like no tool to automate that, but it is something that, if you're working with creators who know what they're doing, who are like established, they know that as well, and they're going to be mindful and responsible to do that. But it is certainly important as a brand, if you're working with creators, to make sure that that's included in your briefs, make sure that's included in their contracts that they might be signing with you, so that you're protected and you can make sure that they know what's expected of them as far as disclosures.
Because we've been asking my friend, how can you 100% sure every pieces of the episodes that we're trying to, so we were thinking like if there a tool or something we'd be able to trace like 100%.
There are tools that can monitor the content to make sure, like brand safety tools that can monitor the content once it's published. And if there aren't disclosures, or like, if you're requiring a specific sort of disclosure, sort of hashtag, for instance, you can verify that that's included in the content. Like once you have access to that live link, you can use that tool to crawl that content and make sure. Doing it upfront and proactively, though, is really like the best way to do it, right? To make sure that before that content ever goes live, that those disclosures are included. And that's really, again, just comes back to the relationship.
What you're referring to is a tool that would flag the posts that are not like suitable for.
Yeah, so if you can include lists of requirements for the content, right? Like it must include this hashtag, and so there are tools that can kind of help evaluate that.
And if it doesn't,
exactly.
That makes sense.
We're a couple minutes over. Do we need to get? Okay. Happy to speak with anybody separately, but thank you all for coming.